Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today's video is going to be another one in my holiday palette breakdown series. And today's palette that we will be talking about, probably the palette I was most excited for to launch this holiday season. And we will be talking about today the new Kat Von D Metal Matte palette. Some of you guys who have been following me for a while might know that last year my favorite holiday palette was the Kat Von D Mi Vida Loca Remix palette, and I was so super excited to see what she was going to launch this year, and like always she did not disappoint. This is definitely a palette that I think is so creative. It's very out of the box. It's very different from most holiday palettes. So let's go over kind of all of the details. So first thing, let's talk about the size. This thing is huge. It is literally the size of my forearm. It is a ginormous palette. It does make it a little bit trickier for traveling purposes, unless this was going to be the only palette that you travel with. It's very hard to fit into a makeup bag. You would have to put it into a suitcase or get a really giant bag to fit this in, because while it is thin, it is very long. A lot of people have been commenting that just from looking at it, that reminds them a lot of the Serpentina palette. And really the only thing that I think is similar to the Serpentina palette about this is its size. Otherwise, there's literally nothing the same whatsoever about the inside of it. Packaging wise, despite the size of it, I do absolutely love the style of this. I love that it says metal on one side and matte when you flip it. I think that's so creative and so genius. That takes a lot of work to design something that no matter what, when you flip it, it still reads matte, it still reads metal, and it doesn't look disjointed, it doesn't look not cohesive. It just all blends well together very nicely. I believe I read somewhere Kat Von D does all of the lettering for this palette, and I think just in general for her company she does all of the lettering, and I think it all looks absolutely stunning. I think it's so pretty. So when you open the palette, you get a nice long mirror like that, and then this is what the actual palette inside looks like. So you get 9 metal shades and 13 matte shades. Now I will say all of the matte shades, as far as I know, are completely new. They're not in any of her other palettes. I do know that at least one of the metal shades is a shade that she actually sells as an individual metal shadow, but all of the other ones I believe are completely new. They aren't in any of her other palettes. Palette retails for $60, which I have found is pretty typical for holiday palettes. I don't know if all of the makeup companies got together and like, we're going to retail all of these for $60. But that seems to be the trend. You do get a lot of bang with your buck, I think, and that's why they justify the extra, you know, $15–20 or so that a normal palette is. I found usually retails from $40 to $45 for higher end brands. So let's go ahead and jump into the swatches for this palette. So we're going to start off first with swatching the metal shades on top. All right, so here are the first 4 metal shades swatched. So the So here are the first 4 swatches of the metal shades. So the top one is Nebula. So it's really deep, vibrant blue. The next one is Watt under that, and this is a very much like a teal marine green type of color, very vibrant, very pigmented. The one below it is Ignite, and this color to me is probably one of the more unique ones because it's a mint, but it has a lot of almost blue to the undertone, so it comes across a little bit more icy than a normal mint color would. It's not quite as green, it has a little bit more blue to it, and underneath that is Tinsel, which is to me like a champagne silver shade. It's not your typical platinum silver color. I feel like there is a lot of champagne in the undertone, so it comes across a little bit more champagne-y than anything else. All right, so here are the next 3 shades. The top 2 are kind of being lost because the sun is going in and out. The top shade is actually Glitz, which I think the reason why it's kind of being lost, it's very much of a baby pink beige color, so it kind of gets lost in my skin tone because I am so fair, but it is it's a pink, but it does have a lot of beige in the undertone, so it's not coming across as quite bright as a pink. It's a little bit more of a muted pink. The next shade underneath that is Twinkle, which is a beautiful icy lavender shade. I think this will absolutely gorgeous, like all over the lid for so many skin tones. So beautiful. The next shade is Volt, which is a little bit more interesting than the other shades because it isn't quite as metallic. It is more of a shimmer than it is a actual metal matte shade, and it has a little bit of glitter to it. It has almost like an iridescent pink sort of glitter to it, but it is more of a like burgundy plum shade. Again, something that I think will look so pretty and flattering on so many different skin tones. I will say with all of the metal shades, I have 2 more left to swatch, but they all apply so buttery and so smooth. They are all of them pigmented. There isn't a single one that is dry. The final 2 shades I have are Synergy, and this is the one that she does sell as an individual, and it is a brown metal metallic shade. And then the next one is Flash, which is more of a orangey gold type of shades. Again, they're all super pigmented, really buttery. There isn't a single one that I feel like has a ton of fallout. Tinsel might be the only one, and I think it is because it is more of that champagne silver shade. I don't know why I feel like silvers tend to get a little bit more fallout. Maybe it's because of what goes into them to give it that pigment and that metallic shade, but I don't notice any sort of fallout with any of the other shades. They all apply super smooth, really buttery with just like the lightest swipe. It's not something that you really have to dig in. I do feel like Kat Von D, when she comes to metal shades, that she does it in such a way that it always applies metallic. You don't necessarily need like Fix Plus or a setting spray or something to kind of amplify the actual metallicness of it. It comes across on that way on its own, which I think is absolutely wonderful. So we're going to go ahead and move into the matte shades. All right, so these are the first 3 matte shades. So we have Linen, which is a stark bright white. This to me is the driest color in all of the matte shades, which is a little bit odd because I feel like white is usually something that comes across as a little bit creamier. For whatever reason, I find that this one is a little bit more dry and a little bit patchy. You kind of have to go over it a couple times to build the intensity. The next shade is Jet, which is a black, and surprisingly this one isn't as dry as most black shades tend to be. I feel like Kat Von D really nails it when it comes to black in her palettes. They are always really intense, really smooth. They don't get that patchiness or that skipping that a lot of black shadows tend to do. The next one underneath is Velour, and to me this is the matte version of Nebula. So a really nice, bright, intense blue. It's absolutely stunning. Okay, so the next 3 colors I have are Stone, Moss, and Ribbon. Now I do think that these 3 are probably some of the drier shades in this palette, which kind of is surprising because for darker shades, Kat Von D usually holds up, but these ones are not as buttery and smooth as some of her darker shades are. Stone is the top one. It is supposed to be like a really dark, like obviously stone gray, almost like what stone looks like when it's wet. It gets a very, very deep gray color. Moss is a really pretty like forest green, and then Ribbon, it's like Volt, in my opinion, just the matte version. It is like a really kind of muted grayish plum color. These colors do apply really nicely on the lid, but I will say for deeper shades, you do kind of have to work with them a little bit. They are a little bit drier as compared to the rest of the palette, and you kind of have to kind of work and blend them a little bit better than with most. All right, so the next 3 shades are Silk, then we have Fringe, and Feather. So Silk, similar to Ribbon, I would just say it's more of that typical dusty mauve kind of rosy color. It's super popular in liquid lipstick, so it's very interesting to see it in an eyeshadow color. The next one we have is Fringe, which is a very like peachy pink color. It's very, very bright, very different for an eyeshadow color. The next one is Feather, which is a yellow, but it's a little bit more muted than most yellows. It's not quite as bright and fluorescent as you will see with like a lot of yellow shadows. So I think that'd actually be really pretty and very usable as a transition shade, to kind of almost think of like Peaches and Cream, or like, what's the Anastasia shadow, like Burnt Orange Matte, or something like that, where it's brighter, but it's not quite as intense, so it works really nicely as a transition shade. All right, and here are the final 4 shades in the palette. So the top one is Oak, which is just a chestnut deep kind of brown shade. The next one underneath it is Suede. It's just a tan kind of nude shade, obviously like the essential like transition color. Think of like Noble or I forget what it was called in her other palette, Noble. Maybe it was also called Suede, but she had in her last holiday palette two kind of those kind of tan brownish shades that are really good for the transition. Next is Bone, which is just like a bone vanilla creamy off-white nude shade, and the last one is Velvet, which is a really deep burgundy shade. Now, overall thoughts on the palette, I do really like it. However, I feel like as a whole, quality-wise, the metals are a lot more pigmented, a lot more smooth than the matte shades. I feel like the matte shades are a little bit more difficult to work with. They're a little bit drier in the consistency and a little bit more patchy when it comes to applying. That being said, I do think the palette itself is worth it just because I think she gives you a lot of really unique shades that you're not going to find in a lot of makeup palettes. I will say, to me, this is the holiday palette for someone you know that is such a makeup addict. They have every kind of makeup palette. They love creating really unique, different, artistry-driven type of looks. I think this palette would be absolutely perfect for them. For the everyday makeup user, I would say probably to skip on it just because performance and quality-wise, it's not going to be... it's something you have to work with a little bit more, and I feel like when you are someone who is more artistry, creative, kind of that kind of driven, at least for someone like me, I will put up with the fact that some of the colors are a little bit drier. I'll put the work into actually creating a look with them because to me, the end result will be worth it. But if you are someone who sticks to typically more neutral looks, who has kind of like a safe zone where you stick with like warm tone, cool tones, and neutral tones, but it's usually in the neutral family, or even if you like to experiment with color but you don't do it that often, I would say skip this palette just because it is going to be a little bit more difficult to work with. It's not a palette that I think you can just like throw in your bag and be able to use at any time. It's not something that's going to be like super easy or super quick to use. It is a palette that I feel like all of the shades work really well together. I think it's beautiful, it's stunning, and I absolutely love this. But for someone like me, I think it's worth it. For the average makeup wearer, I would say skip on it. Save your money for the Lorac Makeup Pro 3 palette for something where you're going to get a bang for your buck, but you're also going to get a lot of use out of it 365 through the rest of the year. For me, this is a palette that if you only get really creative during Halloween or holidays, then this palette is just going to sit the rest of the year and it's going to be a little bit of a waste. I do know that holiday palettes, they come out and they're super cool and they're exciting, and the packaging and the price point, like, it's amazing. But I always stop and think, okay, is this a palette I'm actually going to use the rest of the year and not just during holiday? Or is this a holiday palette that I'm really only going to use during holiday, if that makes sense? And to me, this is a palette that unless you're a super like colorful, creative makeup artist, like if that's kind of your drive, it's probably just going to sit there for the rest of the year. So that's just my opinion on it. No hate, no shade to this brand, because again, I do really like this palette. I think it is absolutely beautiful. I love the craft and the artwork and everything that went into this palette. I think is so creative. But again, for the average makeup user, I'd probably skip on it. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Don't forget to thumbs up and subscribe. Let me know in the comments below what palettes you want to see next. I do have some, again, I said this in my last video, I have a couple other palettes coming in. So let me know if there are any particular sets, kits, and not just limited to like eyeshadow palettes, but like lip kits, blush palettes, skincare sets. Like if there's anything like that you want to review, I will be more than happy to do that, because I do have quite a lot of access to a lot of these palettes. I get to see them kind of thanks to my job, kind of before, once they come, like as soon as they come in, before they're about to like launch and come out in stores, I usually get to see them. And because I'm also Rouge, I also get early access for some items. So anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already. I'll talk to you in my next video.